Welcome to the Arizona Early Intervention Program's presentation on the changes in procedural safeguards dispute resolution. These changes are the result of new federal requirements for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part C. This webinar is one in a series created to help Arizona's early intervention community understand and implement the new requirements effective July 1, 2012. Early intervention professionals function as a team to support families through all aspects of the early intervention process. The Individualized Family Service Plan, IFSP, is a framework for a family's experience in the early intervention and serves as a guide for the team members who are working with families. If early intervention activities do not occur in the time frame or the manner in which is expected or in accordance with the requirements of IDEA Part C, there are procedures in place to support the resolution of the concern or dispute. The three dispute resolution options are mediation, due process hearing, and complaint. A request for mediation may be requested by any parent and/or early intervention provider, for example, a team member, working with a family, if there is a disagreement amongst the team with the child's identification or screening, evaluation, placement or eligibility, provision of services or IFSP services. A request for a due process hearing may be requested by a parent to resolve disagreements related to the proposal or refusal to initiate or change the identification, evaluation, placement, provision of services. A complaint request may be filed by any individual or organization, including out of state, if there's an allegation of an IDEA Part C requirement violation. The following presentation will provide a more detailed explanation of the IDEA Part C procedural safeguards, dispute resolution, federal requirements, the informal versus formal dispute resolution process, and the responsibilities of the early intervention programs and providers, including service coordinators. Families must be informed of their informal and formal dispute resolution options. Parents may use the informal complaint resolution process and file a formal request for mediation, a due process hearing, or file a complaint at the same time. Informal dispute resolution. If early intervention activities do not occur in the time frame or the manner in which expected, families are encouraged to contact their service coordinator or any team member in which they feel comfortable with to discuss their concerns. The service coordinator should make all efforts to address the family's concerns, which may include discussing the concerns with the other team members noted on the IFSP, and if needed, reconvening the IFSP team to discuss making possible changes to the IFSP. Formal dispute resolution. Although a family is encouraged to reach an agreement with their early intervention team, they may at any time request a mediation, request a due process hearing to resolve the disagreement, and/or file a written complaint. During the time in which a request is being reviewed, investigated, or processed, and unless the family and the participating provider agree, the child and family will continue to receive early intervention services identified on the IFSP, in which the parents provided written consent. If the child who is the subject of a dispute is also eligible for another federal or state program which has its own dispute resolution process, DES-AZIP and the other agency or program will collaborate to determine jurisdiction based on the nature of the complaint. The service coordinator is responsible for ensuring the parents understand their dispute resolution options and procedures to exercise one or more of them. The service coordinator may help the parents access the dispute resolution options. Mediation. Mediation allows parties to resolve disputes involving any matter under IDEA Part C, including matters arising prior to the filing of a due process complaint. Mediation is voluntary and may only be used when both parties to the dispute agree to do so. Participation in mediation does not deny the parent the right to any other procedural safeguards under IDEA Part C. In order to initiate a mediation, a written and signed request for mediation must be submitted. The AZIP complaint request form, which is available on the AZIP website, may be used. If the decision is made to use the AZIP complaint request form, the person requesting the mediation selects option number 2, mediation, completes, signs, and submits the complaint request to the DES AZIP office. DES AZIP will obtain written agreement to voluntarily participate by all parties involved in the dispute. DES AZIP will appoint a qualified and impartial mediator who is trained in effective mediation techniques and knowledgeable in the law related to early intervention. The mediation is scheduled and held at a location convenient to the parties involved in the dispute. Upon resolution, DES AZIP ensures the agreement is recorded and parties involved must sign a legally binding agreement describing the resolution that states all discussions that occurred during the mediation are confidential and may not be used as evidence in any subsequent due process hearing or civil proceeding in any federal or state court. A parent may file a request for a due process hearing request to resolve disagreements related to a proposal or refusal to initiate or change the identification, evaluation, placement, or the provision of services. A written decision issued to all parties within 30 days of receipt of the initial request for a due process hearing. During the pendency of the due process hearing, the child must continue to receive the early intervention services on the IFSP in which the parent consent was received. If the child who is the subject of the hearing is also eligible for another federal or state program, which has its own due process hearing procedures, DES AZIP and the other administrative entity will collaborate to determine jurisdiction based on the nature of the complaint. Due process hearing. What's new? Due process hearings must be made available for disputes regarding the identification of children referred to Part C of IDEA and not just disputes regarding children found eligible for Part C of IDEA. Due process hearing officer may grant an extension beyond the 30-day timeline at the request of either party. Any parent involved in a due process hearing has the right to receive a written, electronic, verbatim transcript of the hearing and a written copy of the findings of fact and decisions at no cost to the parent. In order to initiate a request for a due process hearing, the parent must submit a written and signed complaint request. If the parent chooses to use the AZIP complaint request form, the parent selects option number 3, due process hearing, completes, signs, and submits the complaint request to the DES AZIP office. If a parent submits a complaint request to an AZIP service providing agency, that agency must forward the complaint to DES AZIP within 1 business day of receiving the complaint. DES AZIP will appoint a trained, impartial hearing officer who has knowledge about the provision of IDEA Part C. The hearing officer will listen to the presentation of relevant viewpoints about the due process complaint, examine all information relevant to the issues, seek to reach a timely resolution of the due process complaint, and provide a record of the proceedings. Due process hearing procedures must be completed and a written decision mailed to all parties within 30 days of receipt of the initial request. Any individual or organization may file a written and signed complaint with DES AZIP alleging a violation of the requirements of IDEA Part C and the facts on which the complaint is based. Parents or early intervention providers who filed a complaint may voluntarily engage mediation as previously discussed. Complaints. What's new? Parents or early intervention providers who filed a complaint may voluntarily engage in mediation. Extension to the 60-day response timeline may be granted if the parent or individual or organization, DES, the AZIP service providing agency, and/or early intervention providers agree to extend the timeline to engage in mediation. Requirements for the content of written complaints: signature and contact information of the complainant. If the alleged violations are related to a specific child, additional information needed. Complaint must allege a violation that occurred not more than 1 year prior to the date of the complaint was received. A copy of the complaint must be provided to the AZIP service providing agency or early intervention service provider against which the complaint is filed. In order to file a complaint, the parent, individual, or organization must submit a written signed complaint that includes a statement that DES, an AZIP service providing agency, or an early intervention service provider has violated IDEA Part C. The facts on which the statement is based, signature and contact information of the complainant are required. If the alleged violations are related to a specific child, the name, address of the child are required, a description of the nature of the problem, and a proposed resolution of the problem to the extent known or available at the time the complaint is filed. The parent, individual, or organization may use the AZIP complaint request form. This form captures the previously mentioned requirements for a complaint request. This form, which is available on the AZIP website. The person filing the complaint selects option number 4, Complaint. They would then complete, sign, and submit the complaint request to the DES AZIP office. If a written complaint request is also the subject of a due process hearing or contains multiple issues that are also a part of the hearing, DES AZIP will set aside any part of the complaint that is being addressed in the due process hearing. However, any part of the complaint request that is not part of the due process hearing must be resolved within the 60 calendar day timeline. The party filing the complaint must forward or request DES AZIP to forward a copy of the complaint to the AZIP service providing agency or early intervention service provider serving the child at the same time the complaint is filed with DES AZIP. DES AZIP must resolve complaints within 60 calendar days after the complaint is filed unless an exception is granted based on exceptional circumstances exist with respect to a particular complaint, there's an agreement to extend the time to engage in a mediation. A copy of the AZIP complaint request form is available on the AZIP website under Forms. Please contact the DES AZIP office if you have questions or require assistance with completing the complaint request. Civil action. Any party aggrieved by the findings and decisions regarding a due process complaint has the right to bring a civil action in state or federal court. Please remember, the service coordinator is responsible for ensuring the parents understand the dispute resolution options and procedures to exercise one or more of them. The service coordinator may help the parents access the dispute resolution options. Requests to use the formal dispute resolution options must be signed and submitted to DES AZIP. The complaint request form is available on the AZIP website to complete and submit to request mediation, file a complaint, and/or file a due process complaint and hearing. For more information about procedural safeguards, Chapter 7 of AZIP's Policies and Procedures can be found on the AZIP website.